Before I tell you this story, I need you to imagine something. Imagine waking up at 3 in the morning. The room is completely dark. You can hear rain tapping against the window like fingers on a keyboard, soft and steady. And then you feel it. A weight. Warm, familiar, heavy. Someone's arm draped across your chest. And you don't move. You barely breathe. Because in that half-awake, half-dreaming fog, for just 1 second, you let yourself believe something you've never allowed yourself to believe before. And then your heart does that thing. That asterisk thing, where it beats so loudly you're sure the other person can hear it. Can feel it. And you think, asterisk, please don't let this moment end. Now imagine that the arm belongs to your best friend. Your straight best friend. The one you've known for 6 years. The one who has held your secrets, your laughs, your 2 a.m. phone calls, your worst days, and your most embarrassing moments. The one you promised yourself you'd asterisk never fall for. Because some feelings you decided a long time ago are better kept buried. Safer that way. Cleaner. My name is Daniel. And what I'm about to tell you changed asterisk everything. I met Marcus on the first day of sophomore year of college. It was one of those suffocating August days where the heat sits on your shoulders like a second backpack, and the campus smelled like fresh concrete and cheap cafeteria pizza. I was late to orientation, obviously. I'd spent 20 minutes trying to find the right building, my phone was at 4% battery, and somewhere between the science hall and the student union, I walked directly into a table someone was carrying. The table didn't fall. I did. Papers everywhere, water bottle rolling across the sidewalk, one shoe somehow half off my foot. And standing above me with the most unhelpful grin I had ever seen in my life was Marcus. 6 feet tall, brown skin, dark eyes, wearing a faded green t-shirt with a small paint stain near the collar that I would come to recognize as his signature style, accidentally artistic. "You good?" he said. Not "are you okay," not "oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," just "you good?" Like my dignity wasn't scattered across the sidewalk. "Fantastic," I said from the ground. He laughed. And it was the kind of laugh that starts low in the chest and rolls out slowly, warm and genuine, the kind you can't fake, the kind that makes the air around it feel lighter. He reached his hand down. I took it. And that was it, that was the moment, the universe doing its little thing. He helped me gather my papers, he walked with me to orientation. We sat next to each other not because there weren't other seats but because somehow we both just kept walking together without either of us suggesting it. That first day I learned 3 things about Marcus. 1, he was studying architecture. 2, he had a younger sister named Bria who he talked about with this particular kind of soft pride that older siblings have. And 3, he was, as he mentioned casually while we talked about a girl across the room, asterisk very asterisk straight. Not that he said it like asterisk a thing, he didn't. He said it like breathing, natural, effortless, without agenda. And I cataloged that information. Filed it neatly in the part of my brain labeled, things that matter. Because even then, even on day 1 before I really knew him, I felt something. Something warm and inconvenient. I told myself it was just because he was kind. People who are genuinely kind can make you feel things that aren't necessarily asterisk those kinds of things. I told myself a lot of things in those early days. Most of them were lies. We became best friends the way you become best friends when you're young and have time and both love the same obscure things. Marcus was obsessed with old architecture like asterisk obsessed. The kind of guy who would stop mid-conversation to point at a building and say, "Look at that cornice detail, Daniel, look at it." I was obsessed with old films, black and white ones, the kind with dialogue so sharp it could cut glass. We were different in almost every measurable way. He was organized, I was chaos. He planned, I improvised. He woke up at 6 a.m. voluntarily, I considered anything before 9 an act of violence. But we worked. We worked in that specific, undeniable way that some people just do, like 2 puzzle pieces from completely different boxes that somehow fit together perfectly anyway. We had a routine by October. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, we'd meet at the campus cafe, the small one tucked behind the library that nobody really knew about, which is exactly why we liked it. We'd get coffee, him, black, no sugar, me, embarrassingly sweet with oat milk and vanilla, and we'd sit there for 2, sometimes 3 hours, doing homework, talking about nothing, talking about everything. He told me about the girl he was seeing, Sophia, a dance major with long braids and a sharp sense of humor. He talked about her the way boys talk about girls they really like, with this particular kind of nervous energy, like the words are a little too big for his mouth. I listened. I nodded. I gave advice. And every time, somewhere in my ribcage, something quietly ached. But I was good at this by then, I'd had practice. I was out to myself by 14, out to a handful of close friends by 16, out to my family by 18, a whole separate story, a whole separate kind of survival. But I had never, ever, let myself fall for a straight friend. I had rules about that. Rule 1, don't do it. Rule 2, if you feel it coming, still don't do it. Rule 3, refer to rules 1 and 2. I was very disciplined about my rules. Until Marcus. Tone shifts, more complex, slower, emotionally layered. Junior year was when things changed. Not dramatically, not all at once. But the way light changes in a room as evening comes, gradually, imperceptibly, and then suddenly it's dark and you're not sure exactly when that happened. Marcus and Sophia broke up in November. He didn't tell me right away, which surprised me. Usually he told me everything. But I didn't see him for almost a week, and when he showed up at my apartment door one Thursday unannounced at 8 p.m. with a six-pack of root beer and the DVD of Casablanca, my favorite movie, which he claimed to hate but had clearly watched enough times to remember, I understood without him saying anything that something had happened. We watched the movie. Halfway through he said, "We broke up." I said, "I know." He said, "How?" I said, "Because you brought Casablanca. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "She said I wasn't present, that even when I was there I wasn't there." I looked at him sideways. His jaw was working, the way it does when he's processing something he doesn't know how to say yet. "Was she right?" I asked. Long pause. "Yeah," he said quietly, "probably." We didn't talk about it more than that. That was the thing about Marcus, he processed things slowly, privately, and in his own time. He'd give you a sentence when he was ready. The rest, he carried himself. I respected that about him. After the breakup, we spent more time together. I told myself it was just because he needed company, because that's what friends do, and I believed it mostly. We started cooking dinner at my apartment on Fridays. Nothing fancy, Marcus could barely boil water and my skills were limited to about 6 rotating meals, but we'd stand in my small kitchen, music playing, and make something edible, and it felt like home. That specific, irreplaceable kind of home that isn't a place but a person. He started staying later and later on those Friday nights. At first until 10, then midnight, then one morning I woke up and he was asleep on my couch with a throw blanket tangled around his feet and a half-eaten bowl of popcorn on the coffee table. I stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at him for a moment. "Don't," I told myself. And I poured 2 cups of coffee and woke him up and we went back to being just us. The conversation that changed things happened in February. We were studying or pretending to study at the cafe. It was a slow Tuesday, barely anyone else in there, the rain doing its thing outside the fogged-up windows. Marcus had been quiet for a while, in that way where the silence has a shape to it. Finally he closed his laptop. "Can I ask you something personal?" I looked up. "You literally know everything about me." "Not everything," he said. Something in his voice made me set my pen down. "Okay," I said. He stopped, started again. "When you knew about yourself, how did it feel, like before you knew the word for it, before you understood what it was?" I looked at him carefully. "Confusing," I said after a moment. "Like being in a room where everyone else can read the signs and you're standing there wondering if you're illiterate or if the signs are just in a language you haven't learned yet." He absorbed this. "And after, when you did understand?" "Terrifying," I said honestly, "and then slowly, like coming home." He nodded slowly, turning his coffee cup in his hands, round and round. "What made you ask?" I said. He shrugged in that way that means I don't want to say yet, and I didn't push. But the conversation sat with me for days. weeks. And I told myself sternly, asterisk, don't read into it. People ask questions, people are curious, it means nothing. I was so good at telling myself things. Spring semester junior year. April 14th? I remember the date because it was 2 days before my birthday and I was in a strange mood, that particular birthday melancholy where you're not sad exactly, just aware of time in a way you aren't usually. Marcus had texted that afternoon, come over tonight, I'll make food. I'll try to make food, bring back up snacks. I brought chips and a jar of salsa and my laptop in case we wanted to watch something. His apartment was warm. He'd actually made pasta, real pasta, sauce from scratch, which was unprecedented, and we ate at his small table with the window cracked open because April had decided to be kind that day. After dinner, we moved to the couch. He put on music, some soft acoustic stuff he'd been into lately, and we were just talking. Easy conversation, the kind that wanders through topics without purpose. And then somewhere around 11 p.m., the conversation slowed. Got quieter. Got different. I don't know how to explain the shift except to say that there's a quality to some silences that changes the air, like the pressure drop before a storm. Daniel, he said. Yeah. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking at his hands, his elbows on his knees in that posture of his where he's carrying something heavy. I've been thinking about what I said in February, about when you knew. I kept my voice steady, okay. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he said, about myself. My heart was doing something complicated. And he stopped, ran a hand over his face. I don't know what I'm saying, I don't know how to say it. You don't have to say it tonight, I said. You don't have to say it at all if you don't want to. No, he finally looked at me. I want to, The look on his face was one I'd never seen before, not in 6 years. Marcus was confident, steady, measured, he didn't get rattled. But in that moment he looked rattled. I think, he said carefully, that I might have feelings for. He stopped. The room held its breath. My heart was very loud. For someone, he finished, someone I didn't expect. I waited. Someone that makes me question everything I thought I knew about myself. I still waited. And I don't know what to do with that, he said quietly, because it scares me and it's confusing, and I've never felt anything like it before and he shook his head. I don't know what I am. I looked at him for a long moment. Marcus, I said gently, you don't have to know what you are, not tonight, not yet, that's okay. He let out a long, slow breath. How did you deal with the not knowing, he asked. Badly, I said honestly, and he laughed a little, just enough to release some of the tension. But then better, slowly better. Does it get less scary? Yeah, I said, it does. He nodded. And then, because the night had made us both brave in a quiet way, I did something I'd kept myself from doing for almost 2 years. Can I ask who it is? I said, you don't have to tell me. He looked at me again, that look, the one I can't fully describe except to say it felt like standing at the edge of something very high and very beautiful at the same time. I'm not ready to say it yet, he said. Okay, I said. And we left it there. I went home at midnight, walked through the cool April air, and sat on the edge of my bed in my dark room for a long time. Don't I told myself. Don't assume, don't hope, don't do that to yourself. But hope, once it finds a crack, doesn't ask permission. It was 3 weeks later. May. End of semester, finals chaos. Marcus and I had been at the library until it closed at midnight, then back at my apartment with laptops and textbooks and enough coffee to power a small city. He was studying structural engineering formulas. I was writing a paper on the cinematography of Ingmar Bergman. We were useless to each other academically, but somehow we always worked better in the same room. By 2 a.m., my paper was drafted and my eyes were burning. I'm done, I announced, closing my laptop. I physically cannot. Go sleep, Marcus said without looking up from his notes. Are you going home? He glanced at his phone. It's 2 a.m., I'll finish this and crash on your couch. Okay, I got up, filled him a glass of water, left it on the coffee table beside him. Don't stay up too late. Yes, Dad, he said, and I threw a throw pillow at him, and he caught it without looking up, and I went to bed. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. The room was dark, that specific 3 or 4 a.m. dark that's different from midnight dark, deeper, more complete. The rain had started at some point, I could hear it against the window. And I felt it. The weight. The warmth. An arm draped across my chest. And the specific warm presence of someone beside me. My brain went through several stages in rapid succession. Confusion, awareness, recognition. Marcus. He must have finished his work, must have been too tired to stay on the couch, and I don't know, maybe half asleep, maybe operating on autopilot, come into the bedroom. He was on top of the covers, I was under them, he was still in his clothes from earlier. And his arm was across my chest. His breathing was slow and even, he was deeply asleep. I lay completely still. I didn't move for a long time. I focused on breathing evenly, in through the nose, 4 counts, out through the mouth, 4 counts, the way you do when you're trying to convince your body that nothing significant is happening, even though everything in you knows that something significant is happening. His arm was heavy and warm. The rain was soft against the glass. The room was very quiet except for the sound of him breathing. And I lay there in the dark and I let myself feel it just for a moment, just in the privacy of that dark, quiet room. I let myself feel what it would be like if this were real, if this were something, if this were allowed. It felt like standing in a warm room after being cold for a very long time. Like exhaling after holding your breath. Like finding something you didn't know you were looking for. And then slowly, carefully, precisely, I began to rebuild my walls. Because he was my best friend. Because he was figuring out his own things. Because whatever feelings he'd hinted at in April might have nothing to do with me. Because even if they did, even if, he deserved to find his way to himself without me pulling in any direction. Because I loved him enough to be whatever he needed. Even if what he needed was just the best friend who holds everything quietly. I lay there for what felt like a long time. At some point his arm shifted, he stirred slightly. And then, in that drowsy, not quite awake voice that belongs to the middle of the night, he said my name. Just my name. Daniel. Not a question, not waking up, just my name, like a confirmation, like checking that something was real. I closed my eyes. I'm here, I said softly, go back to sleep. He made a small sound, something between a sigh and an acknowledgement, and his breathing deepened again. And I lay there in the dark with his arm across my chest and rain on the windows and his breathing in the room. And I thought, I love him. Not the scared version of that thought, not the buried version, not the version I'd been managing and handling and disciplining for 2 years. The real version. Clear and true and terrifying. I love him. And I thought, what do I do with that? Morning came slowly. The rain had stopped. The room was that particular silver gray of early morning, everything soft-edged and quiet. I heard Marcus wake up before he moved. There's a specific quality of consciousness that enters a person's breathing when they cross from sleep to wakefulness. Something subtly shifts, and I'd been paying enough attention to him for 2 years that I recognized it immediately. The arm across my chest went very still. Then very slowly he lifted it. I kept my eyes closed. I could feel him looking at me, could feel the quality of his attention, surprised, processing. The mattress shifted as he sat up carefully. I heard him run a hand through his hair, a habit of his. I counted to 20 in my head and then let my eyes flutter open like someone naturally waking up. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, looking out the window. His back was to me. Morning, I said, my voice appropriately sleep-rough. He turned. His face, I want to describe his face carefully because it was doing several things at once. There was the sheepishness of someone who'd ended up somewhere they hadn't entirely planned. There was something else, softer and more complicated underneath that. Hey, he said, sorry, I think I fell asleep. Obviously, I said, and stretched like a person who hadn't been awake for 3 hours. I was going to crash on the couch and then he shook his head. Sorry. Don't apologize, it's fine. He looked at me for a moment. Was it weird, he said. And this is where I had to be careful, because there were 2 honest answers and only one of them was safe. Nope, I said, you're not the first friend who's fallen asleep in my bed, don't have an ego crisis about it. He laughed, a little relieved, a little something else, and the tension broke. We made breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice, normal things. We talked about finals and summer plans and whether Marcus's car needed new brake pads. Normal. Fine. Good. But something had shifted and we both knew it and neither of us said it. Summer arrived. We both stayed on campus. Marcus had an internship at a local architecture firm and I was taking a summer class and working part-time at the campus bookstore. We saw each other almost every day. And the thing about June is that it's gentle in a way that makes it harder to keep things properly buried. Long warm evenings, soft light, the campus quieter without the full crush of students. Things felt slower, more spacious, like there was room for things that winter doesn't allow. We were on the roof of Marcus's apartment building one evening. He discovered the access was unlocked, and we'd started going up there with blankets and snacks as the evenings got warmer. The city spread out below us, all lit up. We'd been quiet for a while, just existing. Then Marcus said, "Can I tell you something?" "Always," I said. He was quiet for another moment. "You know what I said in April, about feelings for someone unexpected?" My heart became very still. "Yeah," I said carefully. "I've had time to think," he said, "a lot of time." And he was looking at the skyline, his jaw doing that thing again. "I think I need to be honest with you," he said, "because you're my best friend and I don't want to not be honest with you." "Okay. I meant you," he said. "When I said someone unexpected, I meant you." The skyline blurred slightly. I breathed. "Marcus." "Let me finish," he said quietly, still not looking at me. "I'm not finished." "Okay." I've been trying to understand myself. And what I know is this: I don't have a label for it yet. I don't know what I am. I just know that when I'm with you, things feel different than they do with anyone else, have always felt different. And I know that when I woke up and you were next to me that morning, my first thought wasn't, "Oh no." It was, he stopped, pressed his lips together. It was the opposite of that. I didn't say anything. "And I know," he continued, "that it might be complicated and you might not feel that way, and if you don't, I need you to tell me because the last thing I want to do is mess up what we have. What we have is," his voice got slightly rougher, "what we have is the most important thing in my life. I need you to know that. Whatever comes after this, that stays true." I looked at his profile against the city lights. I thought about 2 years of holding this carefully at arm's length. I thought about the dark room with his arm across my chest and the rain and how it felt like coming home. I thought about rules I'd made and how life so consistently ignores the rules you make. "Marcus," I said. He finally looked at me. "I have been," I said slowly, very deliberately, very carefully, for almost 2 years not feeling things about you. His brow furrowed slightly. "I have been extremely disciplined about it," I continued. "I made rules, I followed them, I was very, very good at not." "Daniel." "Let me finish," I said, and he almost smiled. "I love you," I said, not in a new way, in the way that's been there for a long time, that I worked very hard at convincing myself was just friendship. And I kept not saying it because you deserve to figure out your own things without me adding to the pressure. And because some feelings, I thought, are better carried quietly. The city hummed below us. He was looking at me with an expression that I had never seen on his face before and that I would later, trying to find the word for it, land on, arrived. Like something that had been traveling a long way had finally gotten to where it was going. "You're an idiot," he said very softly. Deeply, I agreed. "I've been trying to figure out how to tell you for months. I know I was watching. And you didn't say anything. I didn't want to push you toward something before you were ready." He shook his head slowly and then he laughed, that full, chest-deep laugh, and then the laugh faded into something quieter and he looked at me with that same expression. "What do we do now?" he said. "I have no idea," I said honestly. "I think we figure it out. Together. Preferably." He reached over and took my hand. Just that, just took my hand, held it and looked back out at the city. And we sat there on the roof in the warm June night with the lights below us and everything changed and everything exactly the same, and I thought, "Oh, so this is what it feels like when you stop running." I would be doing you a disservice if I told you that everything was perfect after that. Love is not perfect, not even the truest kind. Especially not the kind that comes with history and vulnerability, and two people who are each figuring things out simultaneously. Marcus was navigating something genuinely new. He'd spent his entire life understanding himself one way, and now that understanding was expanding, shifting, and that process is not comfortable. It's disorienting. Sometimes it's scary. There were weeks where he went quiet in that particular way I'd learned to read, the silence that meant he was processing, working through something he hadn't landed on yet. And I had to learn to give him that space without interpreting it as rejection, without my own fears filling in the blanks. I wasn't always good at that. There was a night in late June where we'd had dinner and then he'd gotten quiet and then he'd said, "I just need to think for a few days." And I'd said, of course, and meant it, and then spent 3 days cycling through every version of asterisk this was a mistake that existed. He called on day 3. "I'm scared," he said. "I know," I said. "Not of you," he clarified, of the bigger thing, of what it means about me, of what my family will." He stopped. "My dad, he's pretty traditional and I don't know." "You don't have to figure all of that out right now," I said gently. "You don't have to figure out what your dad thinks or what label applies or what it means about the last 20-something years. You just have to figure out what's true for you right now in this moment." Silence. "What's true for you right now?" I asked. "That I miss you," he said quietly. "That the last 3 days have been worse because I wasn't talking to you." "Okay," I said, "that's enough for right now." He came over that evening. We didn't have a dramatic conversation. We just ate takeout and watched a film and sat close on the couch and let things be real without forcing them into a shape yet. That was the thing we learned to do, let things be real without forcing them into a shape. He told his sister Bria in July. She was the first person in his family he told, and the conversation, which he described to me later, sitting in my kitchen, his hands around a mug of tea, was not what either of them expected. She'd been quiet for a moment after he'd explained things, as best he could explain things. He was still understanding himself. Then she'd said, "Marcus, I literally could not care less who you love. I care that you're happy. Are you happy?" And he'd said, yeah, I think I am." And she'd said, "Then that's literally all I need to know." When he told me this, there were tears in his eyes, not sad ones, the other kind, and I felt something that I can only describe as gratitude. Pure, uncomplicated gratitude for Bria, who had just handed her brother a specific kind of relief he'd needed. His dad was harder. We don't need to go into all of it, because it was his story and not entirely mine to tell. But I'll say this, it was hard and there were some painful months, and Marcus got through it with more grace than I think most people would have. And eventually, slowly, his dad came around, not all the way, not at first, but enough. The relationship repaired itself the way things do when people love each other and choose to keep trying. What I want to tell you about is the ordinary things. Because the extraordinary stuff makes a better story. I know, the rooftop confession, the dark room in the rain, the first time he said "I love you" in his car, stopped at a red light in the most casual tone imaginable, as if it had simply occurred to him and needed to be said, and then the light turned green and he just kept driving. Those things are real and they matter. But so do the ordinary things. The ordinary things are learning to cook a new meal together every Sunday with varying success levels. The particular face he makes when he's genuinely absorbed in a problem, a kind of focused stillness that I could look at for hours. The fact that he still points out interesting cornices to me on buildings, and I still find it endearing, and I've started actually looking at them, and he's right, some of them are genuinely remarkable. The ordinary things are the way he leaves his shoes exactly 1 foot too far from the door, which drives me a little crazy and which I say something about approximately never because it's also kind of his. The way he falls asleep during films he claims to love, and then insists he was just resting his eyes and then asks me to explain what happened. The calls from his sister Bria, who apparently considers me family now and treats me accordingly, which is to say with great warmth and also absolutely no mercy. The ordinary things are the first time we argued, a real argument, sharp and uncomfortable, about something I can barely remember now, something about plans and communication, and both of us with our walls up and navigating through it to the other side, and the specific relief of making it through and still being us. The ordinary things are him standing in my kitchen making coffee in the early morning with his hair still messy from sleep, wearing an old t-shirt, completely at home, and looking at me with that particular soft expression he reserves for his most unguarded moments. And me thinking every single time, this is real. This is mine. I almost missed this. I've been trying to figure out why I wanted to tell this story. It's not for attention, exactly. It's not because I think my life is particularly remarkable. I think it's ordinary in most of the ways that count, which is good because ordinary means safe and warm and continuing. I think I wanted to tell it because of the years I spent burying things. Because I know there are people watching this right now who are very good at burying things. Who have made rules for themselves about who they're allowed to feel things for. Who have loved people quietly from carefully maintained distances because it felt safer that way. Because the vulnerability of it was too much. Because they were afraid of what it would cost them. And I want to say to those people, I understand. The burial is a reasonable response to a world that hasn't always made it easy to feel these things openly. The rules make sense. The discipline makes sense. And also, some of the things worth having require you to put down the armor. Not recklessly, not without care. But eventually, if the feeling is real and the person is trustworthy and the ground is as solid as it can be, eventually you have to let yourself feel it. Because the alternative is staying safe in a room where you've hidden all the good stuff so carefully that you can't find it yourself anymore. I also want to say something for people who are, like Marcus, figuring themselves out later than they expected. There is no timeline for this. There is no age by which you should have understood yourself. There is no deadline, no expiration, no point past which it's too late to learn something true about who you are. Marcus was 22 when he started figuring this out. He'd spent his whole life understanding himself one way and then something shifted and he had the courage to follow the shift. That courage is not small. If you are in that place, the place of unexpected realizations, of confusing feelings, of a self-understanding that's expanding in ways you didn't plan for, I want you to know that what Marcus told me was the truest thing. You don't have to know what you are. Not yet, maybe not for a while. You just have to be honest with yourself about what's true right now in this moment. That's enough to start with. And for those of you who have been on the receiving end of a quiet love, who have been the person someone was afraid to tell, I want to ask you to consider being patient with the people who love you quietly. They are not cowards. They are people who care about you so much that they were willing to carry the weight of the feeling alone rather than risk what you have. That is, in its own way, a profound kind of love. Open book epilogue, The Roof 2 years later. Soft warm final. 2 years after that first night on the roof. Same building, same access door, same blankets. But the city looks different when you're happy in your life. Everything does. Not rose-colored, that's not quite right, just clearer, more real, more worth noticing. Marcus is in his final semester of architecture school. He's working on a thesis project about adaptive reuse of historical structures, basically, how old buildings can be reimagined for new purposes without losing what makes them themselves. I've been writing it into my journal because it strikes me as a metaphor that applies to more things than buildings. We're up on the roof on a warm night in May, 2 years since the confession, 2 years since the first careful steps across new ground. He's talking about a building he visited last week, some 1920s commercial structure that a community group is converting into affordable housing, and he's doing that thing where his hands move when he talks about things he loves, sketching shapes in the air. I'm watching him. Not secretly the way I used to. Openly, with full permission, with gratitude. He catches me watching. What, he says. Nothing, I say. You have a look. I'm listening. You have a specific look. Marcus, I'm listening to you talk about a building. You're looking at me like, he stops, smiles, looks away then back, like that. Like what? You know, like what? I do know. The city hums below us. I reach over and take his hand, the way he took mine 2 years ago on this same roof. Just that, just his hand, warm and familiar. Tell me more about the building, I say. And he does. And the city lights are below us and the sky is above us, and we are two ordinary people with a real, complicated, warm, ongoing love, and it is enough. It is more than enough. It is everything. Clapper board outro for the YouTube audience. Warm direct invitation. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you. Truly. You gave me your time, and I don't take that lightly. If this story touched something in you, if you recognized yourself in Daniel, or in Marcus, or in the burying, or in the finding, I want you to know that you're not alone in it. Not even close. The comment section is open. You don't have to share anything you don't want to, but if you want to say something, if this brought something up for you, or you just want to say you were here, I'm reading every single one. If you're carrying a quiet love right now, I see you. If you're figuring out who you are, I see you. If you're just here because you felt like you needed a story tonight, I see you too. Take care of yourselves. And I'll see you in the next one. Yellow heart. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who might need it. Subscribe for more stories like this. And remember, some of the best things start with one brave, terrifying, necessary sentence.